Welcome to Office Hours. I am Jeff Blankenberg. Welcome.
Hi, and I'm Amanda Lang.
Perfect.
How you doing
that was maybe the most awkward introduction we've done yet, but Amanda, I'm glad you're here.
We're still working on
and welcome to everybody on the show. So we have a few announcements as we do every week, and I'd like to get right into those before we get to our guest, Nich Schwab. So the first thing, if you guys don't know, we do a tech talk every single month, and this month's upcoming tech talk is all about the developer console. It's actually tomorrow, and it's taking place at 10 a.m. Pacific on all of our channels. So Maitri Chowbey and Helen Hasbin will be joining us to talk about what's new in the developer console, and you can add the webinar to your calendar in the link that's just been provided inside the chat. The other thing that I'd like to do is talk about the skill quality coach. I've been doing these little tips every week to give you some ideas about things you can do to improve your skill. These come directly from the kinds of insights that you get from the skill quality coach inside the developer console for each of your skills. And so as we think about number 7, today is improving the APL experience. One of the things that we really recommend is giving the ability for your customers to navigate your skill with minimal effort. Simple things like multimodal interactions, selectable items and buttons and trigger actions and swipe through lists and all sorts of interactivity that you can add to your skill using APL. So if you haven't played with APL or you haven't really ventured too deep into it, it's just absolutely amazing what you can do. And one of the ways to look for inspiration that I would recommend is to check out APL Ninja. That's actually, the website is right there in the name, apl.ninja. And you can find all sorts of examples of cool things that other people have built. So if you're looking for some inspiration, that's the place I'd send you.
Thanks, Jeff. Before we get started today, I just want to say that next week's show, we're going to have Sharang Sahani and Britton West from Alexa Smart Home joining us. They're going to be here discussing works with Alexa and remote switch. This is going to be a conversation exciting for the smart home domain. So if you're interested in smart home, be sure to tune in next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. All right, let's get right into our guest. Maybe not into, that sounds weird, like we're just dissecting him or something. But I want to welcome Nich Schwab to the stream. Nich, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. How you guys doing?
Yeah, sorry to start with dissection so quickly.
Yeah, I prefer to remain in one piece.
All right, fair,
fully assembled.
The remote nature of this broadcast prevents much that we can do there. I think once we have like fully autonomous robots that can walk around, maybe I could threaten you with some surgery remotely, but for now I think we're safe. All right, so you are an Alexa champion. You have founded a company called SleepJar. There are many other credentials. I know there was a great article a long time ago that was published about you, about how building Alexa skills allowed you to buy a Tesla. I thought that was a very cool story. So I'd love to, before we get too deep into this, I'd love for you to just kind of give people your introduction.
Yeah, I'm Nich Schwab. I'm the founder of SleepJar. SleepJar helps people relax, sleep, meditate, and focus through the power of audio. Myself, I am a web developer by trade. I went to school for that, and I was able to apply my knowledge as a full stack web developer into building Alexa skills back in 2016 is when I first started.
Yeah, it's been a while for sure. And so how would you describe SleepJar today?
Yeah, so SleepJar has expanded since we originally launched it. We started off with just a series of ambient sounds, thunderstorm sounds, rain sounds, ocean sounds, and we've expanded to narrated content now. So now we offer a selection of stories that are exclusive to SleepJar. We have journeys and we have meditations as well.
Nice. What? So I'm not familiar with that one. So meditation makes sense. Stories make sense. What is journeys?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. Journeys, I describe them as a first-person retelling of an adventure. So a journey could be exploring the Grand Canyon or driving from Key Largo to Key West. Very fact-based. There's a lot of knowledge nuggets in there. Cool. In those journeys. And really just a different way for people to fall asleep or relax their mind.
Wow, that's pretty cool. When you said journeys, the thing that came to my mind is I was imagining someone climbing a mountain or going on a long hike, and you get like the ASMR of that, right? Like the crunching of the gravel on the path, and like you can hear the ambient sound, but then they're also like describing what they see for you. Maybe I'm just feeding you new ideas. Who knows?
Yeah, so we don't go that in depth yet as far as like adding sound effects goes, but we do layer our various narrations with a sound. So I can't remember which ones pair with which content, but for example, hike to a forest cabin, one of our journeys, might be paired with rustling leaves, for example.
Got it.
That sounds so meditative. We usually just actually, when I say usually, I use this every night, but we usually just use the white noise and the other sound effects to fall asleep at night. It's really been a very useful skill in our household. We live pretty close to trains, and like having that nice like meditative noise on top of the sound of trains outside, it smooths everything out.
Yeah, it
So,
makes a huge difference.
Amanda, I'm actually curious for you. I had to do some experimentation, but I actually found that pink noise was the one that was the most effective for me. Like it, I think I've even told you this before, Nick, but I have a little bit of tinnitus, ringing of the ears. It's not distracting or anything, but if I focus on it, like I can hear a little bit of ringing, and pink noise seems to negate that. And so when I turn that on at night, like I don't hear the little bit of ringing I have in my ears. And I didn't know if you'd experimented to like, because I think Nick has like a dozen colors or so of sound.
Yeah, we usually use the thunderstorm or the ocean. The ocean is kind of our favorite. When I was in college, even I used to have a CD of the ocean that I would play on loop because it would help me sleep at night. So it's just like an evolved version of that. But I haven't tried the pink or brown noise, so I would be curious to see how that works.
Am I right in saying there's a dozen colors? There's probably even more than that.
Actually, we only offer, I think, 3. We have white noise, brown noise, pink noise.
Really?
But we get requests for different colors or different frequencies all the time. And it depends on the person. Everybody has their own hearing profile. So while you might enjoy pink noise, someone else who has tinnitus might prefer brown noise or white noise or green noise.
Right. Makes sense. All right, I have one more question about these journeys, because now I've got a whole picture in my head. We were talking about like, at least I was describing like someone walking through the forest on a gravel path. Like you get that ASMR sound. What I'm imagining is that there is a future in which Sleepjar has a recording rig that like there's microphones on your ankles and there's microphones like on your hands, and so you're just trying to capture the ambient sound. I'm being silly, I know, but it like that seems like that would be a kind of a relaxing thing to like audibly go on a hike, where you're hearing every step and every crunch of every, like that would be kind of cool. I think I'm not into the ASMR stuff where it's like people chewing or any that stuff drives me crazy, but I think the idea of being outside is that sounds delightful.
It's different strokes for people, right? Sometimes I like to watch the cooking videos where it's just the cooking sounds, but other times, it's not for sleeping. It's just because I like to watch people cook cakes or whatever.
Right. All right. Well, so we've gotten deep into this. A lot of what you're doing is streaming audio, and you're doing it in a variety of different ways. One of the things I'm always curious about, and I'm sure these numbers are astounding, is like how much audio does Sleepjar stream every month? It's got to be astounding.
We stream a crazy amount of audio. We stream over 10 petabytes a month.
10 petabytes?
Yep.
Wow. I gave a talk. I gave a talk. Probably this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, where I had done some research, and as best as you can estimate it, the amount of data that was available on the internet was measured in petabytes.
Wow. All of the data on the internet.
It's now in zettabytes, which is significantly larger.
It's huge.
But man, that's an accomplishment. Petabytes. That is a few bytes. As
just a few.
And so where, if you can get into the details of this, and I don't want to get any deeper than you want to, where are you storing all of that audio, and where are you streaming it from?
Good question. So we have a few different hosting partners, and we also have like a fallback layer as well. So we have one hosting partner who is our primary CDN, content delivery network. They load our files from an origin, such as S3 or Wasabi, and then they cache them extremely heavily and redistribute them. And if either one of those origins goes down, then the other one takes precedence. Or if our primary CDN goes down, then we actually fall back to CloudFront.
Nice. Huh? Oh. Nice. Petabytes. I just can't.
It's a lot. So, aside from Journeys, what's the newest thing you've launched on Alexa right now?
Well, today we're actually announcing app-to-app account linking. So,
like today?
Like today.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we've been testing it with just a few folks, and it's been going really well. So today is our actual launch day for the feature. So what that allows folks to do, thank you. What that allows folks to do is link their Sleepjar account from our Android or iOS app to Alexa. So if they have a premium subscription on Alexa, as a lot of our customers do, they would be able to access that premium content in our mobile apps as well.
That's awesome. Congratulations on the new launch.
Thank you. It's definitely one of the most difficult features we've ever built.
What was the hardest part about doing the app-to-app account linking?
I would say, yeah. So when we went through this journey, because when we initially launched our iOS and Android apps, we knew that people were going to want app-to-app account linking or some kind of account linking to be able to access their premium content across our apps. And we knew that people wanted the ability to listen offline, which we couldn't offer through Alexa, but we can offer through our mobile apps. So we knew that this avalanche of customer feedback was coming, right? So we've been looking into how we want to do account linking for like literally months. We experimented with building our own custom account linking mechanism by like generating a random code and having them speak that to Alexa. We thought about doing login with Amazon. We thought about doing voice forward account linking, and we pretty much tested every single scenario, every single possibility, and we ended up landing on app-to-app account linking as the most customer-friendly way to do it. It allowed people to essentially tap 2 buttons in our app and be linked and done. And they could also link to multiple skills if they wanted to that we offer very quickly. So the biggest challenge while building app-to-app account linking was creating an OAuth service. We had to build our own OAuth service provider from the ground up, and reading the whole spec sheet of how OAuth 2.0 works. It's mind-boggling, but it's also really cool. That's a lot of work. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but seeing the customers link and having it just work, it's a super magical experience. Even if you don't have premium on Sleepjar, I recommend trying it out just to see what the capabilities are with app-to-app account linking.
So I'm always curious to ask this question, and there's no right or wrong answer here. But as you think about app-to-app account linking and the things that you've evaluated, right? I've thought about it the same way, like, I'll just give somebody a 4-digit code or something that would allow them to then easily pair the two together without having to do any heavy lifting. If you could design your perfect scenario working with Amazon and whatever technology you have, is app-to-app account linking the thing you would pick, or is it just the best option you have? And then the follow-up to that is, what would be the best option if you could just create it from scratch?
Ooh, you ask good questions, Jeff.
I want your feedback. That's what I want.
One of the things that I've really, really, really hoped for, and I've been asking for years, is the ability to identify a customer across skills. So as a developer, I would hope that I could identify a single customer across any of our skills. Unfortunately, that's not possible. If you implement account linking and then that customer account links on every one of those skills, then you can identify them across skills, but otherwise it's not possible. So I think that would be a huge opportunity for Amazon to tackle. But in terms of linking outside of the Alexa ecosystem, I feel like there's probably some improvements that could be made there. From a technical perspective, I don't have an answer right off the bat, but I just think, if there's a way to do app-to-app account linking without requiring a developer to make an OAuth service, because that was a huge lift, even as somebody who has 10 plus years of software engineering experience, it's a big thing to do. So I think from the customer experience perspective, app-to-app account linking is almost golden, like it's beautiful. But from a developer standpoint, it's very tough.
Okay, so it was a huge heavy lift for you and your team, but ultimately it makes it a very simple lift for your customers, which is ideal. But you would like a solution that it makes it not only super easy for your customers, but also not a huge implementation hurdle for the development team as well, which I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Like I said, if you could ask for the world, I'm always curious to know what the world looks like. So that's definitely good to know. All right. So app-to-app account linking, as you said, just launched and is something that people should try out inside any of your skills. But I would be curious to know, as you think about all of the changes that you've made to your skills and the improvements that you've made over time. I remember when you first started thinking about putting things in APL and demonstrating things on screens. And there's been you've really followed the roadmap of Alexa quite closely. What is the change that has been the most impactful for you as a business inside your skills?
Yeah, I'd have to say ISPs. Adding in subscriptions to our skills has been game changing. Back when the rewards program was first rolled out, I got a call from Paul Cussinger, and when that was first launched, and he shared how much we were going to be making in that initial month of rewards, and it was amazing, and it allowed us to pay our bills and grow. And of course, over time, we didn't want to depend on rewards. So once in-skill purchasing came out, and subscriptions specifically, we decided to launch that and offer some additional features to customers who subscribe. It turned out that it was a fantastic move. We're seeing pretty good conversion rates, and now the amount that we make from in-skill purchases, it just blows away whatever we made from rewards back in the day.
Well, and that's good, right? I mean, rewards, for those that remember that program, that was basically, hey, if you have a ton of traffic and you're doing really well and having an impactful, an outsized impact on the customer base, we have money for you. And it was just Amazon basically providing a payback to developers that were having a great amount of success with our customers. And so I think that was a good strategy, because that program has, for the most part, been sunsetted. And I know that we have some new programs like our Skill Developer Accelerator program that we talked about last fall, that are meant to try to replace some of those kinds of initiatives. But I think that was wise to think like, no, we've got to find ways to stand on our own, make our own money, and do it the right way. If we're going to be a real business, we can't just count on Amazon's charity, which is I think that was wise.
So
Exactly.
I would like to follow up a question with that, because I'm curious to know what lessons you've learned from doing ISPs over the last, few years, and how your approach to ISPs has evolved.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that we've learned just through our own development and through seeing what other skill developers have done who've implemented ISPs is managing your upsell patterns really carefully. Not only do you want to have a strong upsell, but you don't want to upsell too frequently. So we actually have a lot of guardrails in place to make sure that people aren't upsold too frequently, whether it's a number of skill launches consecutively, or the number of days between when they were first solicited an offer versus the next time. And also some other guardrails based on other in-skill messages that we might have to help them kind of train to how to use the skill. So it's, I think it really varies on the skill and what your skill does of how you approach upselling your ISP. But I think that is the most important thing that you can look at when integrating ISPs.
Did you find it effective to ever, because again, a lot of your stuff is sleep sounds, or at least initially it was. Did you ever find it effective to try to upsell someone like at 2 a.m?
We actually do that. Like if you launch the skill at 2 a.m, and that's when you launch it, that's when you could get upsold.
Right.
We don't have any time of day guardrails in place for that.
But it wouldn't, like, you wouldn't play for 4 hours and then like, hey,
right. Yeah. We definitely, we don't interject in the middle of a session. That would definitely be bad form.
Yeah.
And probably make a lot of people angry.
Have you found that there's a sweet spot for the kinds of delays? So I'm actually building a skill myself. And one of the things I'm looking at is how often do I want to upsell someone? And so the easiest way for me to measure first was number of sessions, right? I'll do this every 5th session or every 10th session or whatever. But I think that there's also something to be said for time, because if 10 days have passed, well, I don't want to wait for 5 sessions. It's been 10 days since they've been back. I want to remind them now. Have you found a good sweet spot? Like, is there something that, at least for your specific scenarios, that has worked well?
So I won't go too far into detail with that, but
Okay.
But I will say that our skills are very habit forming. A lot of folks use them every single day. So when we look at setting a number of sessions or launches guardrail, we can't rely solely on that, because there's a good chance that if everybody's if people are using it every day, if we set that guardrail to 5 days later, they're going to hear another solicitation and they're probably not going to be happy about it. So we have a launch guardrail in place, or session guardrail in place, and then we also apply a number of days. And we experimented with that. In some cases, I think doing like an exponential back off is ideal. So maybe the first time you wait 7 days, maybe the next time you wait 14, then you wait 21, whatever. I think that would be ideal in a lot of cases, because the chances are if somebody says no to your ISP 1-2 times, they might not ever say yes to your ISP.
Right.
Unless you've added significant value since the last time you upsold them.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think that makes sense. And if you could go the alternative path, which is the inverted exponential, which is the more they say no, the more you annoy them. I don't think that will work well with your customers, though. I think that's probably not advised.
People will give up.
Yeah, I guess if your operating expenses for your skill are like abnormally high, then maybe you want to do that inverse, exponential curve. But I think from a customer happiness standpoint, that's probably not a wise decision.
Yeah, I agree. Even if they're just using it in a free state, at least you still have them as a customer versus they've stopped showing up entirely, which is much, much worse.
Yep.
It's really interesting to hear about that too, because I know how tricky it is sometimes to get a free writing customer to convert. So you have to have all these different best practices, and it's going to be different with a voice only skill versus, if you're making a mobile app, you've got pop-ups and, flashy things on the screen, but with the voice only skill, which is primarily now, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of your customers are using the voice only, right?
Yep. Yeah. The vast majority of our customers are on Alexa. And we have a growing number that are getting our mobile apps, and, having account linking, I think, is definitely helping folks understand that, hey, we have this ability to play offline now, but when you're home, you prefer to use Alexa.
Right. So you talked earlier about stuff that you'd love to see in account linking, but what else is on your wish list? What else do you think would be great to have Alexa build and support for your business?
Oh my gosh, I have 20 things. I have a list that I recently made, and I'm keeping track of, and there's so many things. Some of them are big, some of them are small. I think one thing that's pretty small that would be a huge benefit to developers is setting a default locale in the developer console. As a company who has skills available in 10 different languages or something like that, I think right now our default locale ends up being set to Arabic when I open the developer console, and I don't speak Arabic, so it makes it a challenge having this constantly switch back to English. That's one thing. I think the ability to include price and discounts in your ISP upsells is low hanging fruit, but I can see that there's probably some legal ramifications and stuff around that.
Right.
But I think just being able to say, all right, instead of making the ISP purchase flow a 3-step process, I think it is right now, to a 2-step process, cutting 33% of the funnel is just going to be a huge benefit to everybody.
Yeah. I feel like I would like to spend some time on this list if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Your first item, you mentioned that being able to set the default locale is a problem. I know why. I think a lot of our viewers might know why, but I would like to make sure that we spell that out. So my assumption is the reason you want a default is because you generally release features or whatever in English US first. I'm assuming that's the one you use. Yep. Or that's where you do your testing. And what you're finding is that you get in there and you forget that it's changed. You're making changes in the wrong locale. It's not working when you test. Is that ringing some bells? Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah. Every time I go to the test tab in the developer console to test the speech model or some kind of recognition, I have to switch it to English. So that's kind of annoying. Or if I want to go in and take a look at, we do all of our stuff programmatically. We use Smappy to update our manifest and our models. So if I ever want to go in and just look at the skill description to make sure that it generated correctly, I have to go in and switch back to English. So
got it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm probably going to ask some questions like that just to make sure that I'm framing that properly. This is a piece of feedback. I wrote a very long, let's not call it a manifesto, but it was verging on that last fall for our product team. Hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff that I've heard from a pile of developers. These are all the kinds of feedback that they're looking for. And that was tops on my list, because you do actually, when you start building a skill, one of the first choices you make is what is your default language, and then that default doesn't carry through. And I find myself, when I build multi-locale skills, that it defaults to India for some reason, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to change it back to English US and before I can keep moving forward. So I have felt that pain myself for sure. What else you got? Don't hold back. You're happy. I'm happy.
Yeah. So one thing that I've actually encountered recently with APL. So we have APL in our skills. It's fantastic. Granted, the learning curve was a bit high, but we got there. It looks like APL behaves differently on an Echo Show device versus a Fire TV device. And when it happens is when you interact with that device. So if you load up SleepJar on your Echo Show and then you touch the screen while it's speaking to you, it will stop speaking and assume that you're going to interact with it via touch, which makes total sense. Right. However, on a Fire TV, if you launch a skill and it shows the APL and you start navigating with the D-pad, it keeps talking to you and will reprompt you. So I would love to see that become uniform, being treated more like how the Echo Show is, where if you start navigating with the D-pad, it stops talking to you and assumes that you're going to interact with the controller.
Yeah, that is a brand new one, Nick. I've never heard that one before. And I have one of the new Fire TVs that they launched last fall, and so I try using a lot of APL on that device, and I haven't encountered. That one hadn't registered with me, so that's a good catch.
We should give SleepJar a try.
We just got a TV with the Fire TV functionality, and it's been a little bit of an adjustment because we have the Echo Show and the Fire TV kind of close enough to each other that when you talk to one, the other one can hear it. And sometimes it doesn't sure which one I'm talking to, and they do have they are a little bit different in terms of how they interact. So
yeah, and in fact, at least on my Fire TV, and I would assume this is true in all of them, it even says like assume I'm the priority. There's some setting that you can make in the Alexa settings for the Fire TV device that says if, because the way it works today is if you have 4 Echoes just sitting in your kitchen, when you talk, whichever one gets the response to the server first wins. And so generally that should mean like speed of sound should win, right? But it doesn't always work out that way. Whichever one gets the response to the server first wins, and then additional similar responses will just be ignored and the other devices won't respond. They'll shut things down and you'll just talk to the one. But I thought it was interesting that the Fire TV devices say, make me the priority, or I can't remember the exact phrasing, but basically it assumes that you want that device to be the primary device that responds, which means even if it's slower, it will be the one that is prioritized, which I think is potentially good. I think if your TV is the center of your room, maybe, but
I think it depends on your layout and what you're looking for. My Fire TV isn't in the bedroom, so I haven't tried using sleep sounds on it yet. It's down in the living room.
Got it.
I'd be curious to know if that setting is applied to a device group or applied to all of your Alexa devices.
It appears to be just a individual device. It basically, when I set up my Fire TV, it just said, "Hey, do you want if there are multiple devices that hear, do you want me to be the primary?" And I think I said yes or something like that. But there were times where I was confused. I was like, "Why is that one listening? I'm in the kitchen." And it was because it was near enough that it got the priority.
Happens to me all the time with my office, which is why this office door has to be closed if I'm trying to do stuff in the kitchen.
Right. Makes sense.
Remember back in the day before there was that, I can't remember what Amazon calls it, like the spatial recognition or how they determined which Echo to respond with. In the day, before that was a feature, you would have multiple devices respond to you at the same time. It was wild.
Yeah, you could have 7 of them all respond at the same time. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, do we want to take a look at some of the questions in chat or comments in chat we've got coming up today?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Got a lot of hellos from a lot of the usual suspects. Hi, folks. How's your day going? All of us are on the East Coast this time around. So it's not early morning for us.
Yeah, I see a comment from Hugo saying on a Fire TV you have to suffix the request with skill, otherwise it might launch a Fire TV app, and that's something that we run into a lot too. I would love to see, if a customer is interacting with their Fire TV via voice, I think skills should take a precedence. And if they're interacting with the remote, then I think that native apps should take a precedence.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've heard that feedback from a number of skill builders where their skill works marvelously on every Echo device. But when you go to Fire TV, all of a sudden, when you ask for their skill, you get some kids game or some other weird thing. And it's like, why is that happening? Like I'm saying the right words the right way. And that skill, that app, it's usually a Fire TV app that's interfering somehow. That app doesn't even have a name that's similar. I think Steve over at Big Sky, he had like Happy Shark or something that was launching instead. And it was just like,
oh my gosh.
Why? So I think we've solved that for him specifically, but I don't think it's solved overall, which is still a bigger challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we have in here? There's a bunch of good conversations happening in here.
Yeah. Dana
someone
Boy
thought
says
you should have a sleep sound for mouse noise, just the sound of
Oh.
mice just like
Yeah.
running through your house. That sounds awful.
That sounds terrible.
No, I don't think
I-
so. I don't think anyone would appreciate that type of
It's a funny joke, though. Funny
it's a
joke.
tough one.
Yeah.
My
We've thought
my
about
new
adding some like
relaxing-
prank sounds though.
Yeah, prank sounds would be funny. Do you have a fart sound skill?
We don't. But it's something that we've thought about. It's kind of in our wheelhouse, but
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
sleep sound skill, but it's interrupted by dogs barking halfway through the
right. It may be a good April Fool's joke if we want to make a lot of people angry.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing that I've seen devices that do this, but you've probably seen these. It's like a little circuit board that just takes like a simple like penny battery, and you can like slap it under somebody's desk, and it beeps at very infrequent times. So it might beep 3 times over 10 minutes, and then it won't do it again for like 3 days.
Yep.
And so it's just like an Annoyatron, or I don't remember what it's called, something like that.
I think it's called that, yeah.
That would be an interesting sleep sound to start on someone's device, right? Where you only make like these little beeps once in a while, but it's unclear when or why or how that's happening because they don't realize the sleep sound's playing at all. That'd be pretty funny.
Right. Yeah. Then subscribe to premium to get the 10-hour version, high quality.
Subscribe to premium to turn it off, right? Like you've got that's the way to stop. All right. So there were a couple of other good ones in here. Witter said CloudFront as your primary fallback would be expensive. You're welcome to pass on this question if you don't want to talk about it, but I would imagine you have a pretty significant AWS bill or whoever your hosting providers are. Do you find that there's a greater expense in the origin or in the frontage?
The frontage. So from an origin perspective, our costs are pretty minimal. S3, for example, is really cheap. And so is Wasabi, one of our other origins. But from a CDN perspective, because we serve so much data, we've negotiated good rates with our primary CDN provider. Of course, since we're using CloudFront as a fallback, we only fall back to them if there's an outage with our primary. So we can't negotiate great rates there. But ideally, in that situation, it would be a very short-term outage, and the higher cost for that short term wouldn't be terrible. But it is something that we think about. And one thing that is actually on my wish list for Alexa is the ability to have a small cache available to developers where you could cache audio or cache video. Because one thing that's prevented us from really exploring the video segment is the cost associated with it. Cost of streaming video is significantly higher than streaming audio.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I imagine if you could find a way to access a cache locally on a device, you would then be in a situation where you have a lot of funds freed up, right? Because now, you've stored that audio file on their device once. Every time they open the skill, they're using the same cache over and over, and you've only had to deliver it once. That would cut your hosting bills, I bet, by a significant amount.
Yes, very significant. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars every month on hosting.
Wow.
Of course, I'd imagine for your skill, you'd have to cache a good 8 to 10 hours of content.
Yeah. So we have our standard tracks are an hour long, so caching those wouldn't be too difficult. But then we have 10-hour versions for our premium customers, so those are larger files. So depending on what the cache size available is,
just curious, how did you come up with 10 hours? Is that just a reasonable amount to expect someone to sleep?
I went back and forth between doing like 8 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, 12. And I figured out all right, I think most adults get probably between 6 and 7 hours a night of sleep. Whereas babies might get, 12, depending on how old they are.
Yeah.
Of just continuous sleep. So we wanted something that was kind of meeting in the middle. And I think 10 hours is a good landmark. And one thing that we do too is we do a fade out and fade in for all of our sounds, whether it's a 1-hour version or a 10-hour version, so that even if it does have to loop into another track, so to speak, the perception of it is very minimal.
Got it. And is it hard? I mean, I imagine with like white noise, it's not terribly jarring, but is it hard to just put the ends of an audio file together? Is there a jarring noise there? Is that why you do the fades?
Yeah. So trying to make 2 tracks completely seamless, or 1 track completely seamless, like having the start match the end perfectly so that it could just loop without doing a fade, is really, really hard. There are ways to do it. However, if that file doesn't get preloaded, so it could start immediately after the first ends, then you're going to hear a moment of silence, right? So with that situation, having that fade out and then fade in, if there is just a moment of silence between there, you don't even notice it because of the fades.
Things I've never thought of before, but that's awesome.
Yeah, and different file type encodings actually have different limitations too, of whether or not you can expect an audio file to stop exactly when you want it to, or whether or not there's like a 1 or 2 milliseconds or even microseconds of audio at the end of it.
Wow. Yeah, and go ahead, Amanda. Sorry.
You might not notice that if you're asleep, but you actually might. Like, it might wake you up, because I've noticed, like, if something cuts out, like if the internet cuts out in the middle of the night, it's like, oh, I don't hear my sleep sound anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the discoveries you're describing here, I mean, these are only come with experimentation or with customer feedback, right? That's not the thing you would necessarily be able to know easily. Do you have as I think about testing your stuff, do you have like 3-second versions of your stuff so you can test what the loop sounds like? Do you guys do any of that kind of stuff? Because I can't imagine sitting around waiting 10 hours to hear what it sounds like.
I did that in the early days. But since then, that was back when it was very experimental, like messing with different audio formats, messing with the audio player event responses that we get, to make sure that we're looping correctly. Once we got all that down, we don't really test that way anymore. Now we test with our actual files. But yeah, I think for people starting off, it's probably good to start with a very short file to make sure that they're looping well.
Just to be able to hear what you're running into and how it all works.
Exactly.
We've got some suggestions from the chat about doing subliminal ASMR upsells.
Yeah.
We get questions from our customers asking, do you guys do subliminal messaging? And I'm proud to say that we don't. However, I'm sure we're leaving some money on the table by not doing that.
Sure.
Could be a whole other market sector for you. Some people want that. Some people want the subliminal quit smoking tapes.
Right. Or just, with like real sponsors that are like, hey, I want them to wake up hungry for Dunkin' Donuts. Right. That would be amazing. So Malero had one, which is they'd love to see consumable limits raised to $50 from $20. That's an ISP thing. What else is on your list, Nick? Anything else that's like got you frustrated or annoyed or just could simplify your life? Obviously, on-device caching would be a gold mine for you. So I'm sure you're talking with the folks at Amazon about how to make that happen, but that's not an easy fix.
It's not. It's very hardware specific. So there's huge lead times with that, and there's costs associated with adding that kind of storage to a device. So, I have no idea if it's in the future, but I sure hope it is eventually.
Right.
I have a ton more things on the list. I think one thing is real voice account linking. So back when voice account linking was initially talked about, it was a little bit different than what it is today. I won't go too into the depth of that because it is private beta, but how it was released is unfortunately not what we think would be a great user experience. Right now it relies on the phone. Even if you do voice forward account linking, it sends a code to the person's phone, and then they have to read that back to their Alexa device. And we opted not to go that route because we think the user experience wasn't as good as what we could achieve with app-to-app account linking.
Got it. And just for those folks that haven't used it before, does it send it as SMS? Does it send it as an app notification? What's that code you're describing? How is it sent to the user?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's an SMS.
Yeah, my instinct was SMS also, but I wasn't sure. And so I wanted to make sure I asked you, but it's okay that you don't know the answer either. App-to-app account linking is not something that I've implemented only because I haven't had the need to do it.
Yeah.
But it is something that's on my list to like get deep into and take apart. So I agree with you though. I think that it's interesting. We were talking earlier about how you do account linking and how you've kind of leaned into this app-to-app model, and that you've tried other experiments with things like codes and other stuff. And it's interesting to me that Amazon themselves chose to go with a please recite a code for me solution. as the voice account linking solution for today. Because I think that there are many ways to solve that problem, and some of them are highly engineering heavy, and some of them are very, very simple. But it's always interesting to see how people, kind of approach these problems based on their own backgrounds and experience and everything.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm just scrolling down some of the questions too. David Curley says, Nick, read default locale in console. If your SMAPI updates are scripted, you could end your scripts by generating and outputting URLs to open the relevant console dev pages in your default locale. So workaround, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good workaround.
Seems like we should still do the default locale thing, though.
Yeah,
I think so. Or even just defaulting to the first locale you ever added to your skill, I think would be a good path forward.
Yeah, that is. I mean, if that's the choice you made to start, that's probably the choice you wanted to make going forward. I'm completely with you. And Habuma adds about the voice forward account linking that it's limited to login with Amazon, which is limiting if you want to use OAuth 2 or you want to use anything that is outside the bounds of login with Amazon. So it's obviously not as robust, I think, as developers would like the flexibility to have.
Yeah, and on that note too, one thing that I thought about while we built app-to-app account linking is it would be great to be able to still offer some kind of voice-based account linking. And unfortunately, there's no way for us to do that right now because we implemented our own OAuth service provider, with app-to-app account linking. And there's no way to do a login with Amazon-based account linking at the same time because they're different OAuth providers.
Right.
So if there was a way to basically separate or basically offer two different account linking mechanisms in one skill, I think that would be ideal. So you could have your own OAuth service provider and then also use login with Amazon for the voice-based stuff.
Yeah, I've often dreamed about the idea that Amazon could be an OAuth store for you. I've given a talk in the past called The Future of People, and it hinges a lot around the concept of users allowing the context of their lives to flow through the artificial intelligence. And so an example would be like you and I haven't seen each other in person in quite a while, and it recognizes that Alexa as a whole recognizes that Nick is connected to Jeff. Both of them are going to be in Las Vegas for an event. I should put something on their calendar that's just a half an hour at a bar that's between where they're staying so that they can get together and just chat for a half an hour. Now, you didn't plan it. You didn't even know I was going to be at the event. I didn't plan it. I didn't know you were going to be at the event. But now I have this awesome calendar invite that's like, hey, Nick and Jeff have a half an hour blocked off to get together and talk. But as you start thinking through the loop that needs to be possible for that to happen, right? It needs access to both of our calendars. It needs access to our locations. It needs access to a bunch of other kind of contextual data that if it had all of those things, man, that would be so powerful. But then there's always the part of you that's like, but do I want to give it all of that access? Do I want it to have all of that knowledge, right? And so there's a balance there. But let's take I'm worried about someone doing something malicious with my data off the table. I've worked at Amazon for 7 years. I've endorsed this product for that entire time, and I'm very confident that we're not using anyone's data in an inappropriate way. So let's take that concern off the table and just say, man, wouldn't it be awesome if my Alexa could know everything that I know? My favorite foods, how I order things. Like I generally, regardless of what I order in a restaurant, will make some customization so that I get a new fresh one, even if it's just like removing mustard from a McDonald's cheeseburger or whatever. And so it could know those things about me. As we start to grow that, though, man, what if it had the ability to log into my Facebook account or my Twitter account or my whatever account that may exist out there, and it could take advantage of that knowledge and that context and even do things on my behalf, things that I've authorized, of course. But as we start to think about this, it's not just like little one-off things to your skills or your apps, but now it's about Alexa having the access and the context to understand like, oh, he listens to sleep sounds at night. These are attributes of a person that does these things, and I know this about them, and I understand how this process works. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much more that could be done as more context is granted. But obviously, there's a sliding scale.
say you always buy tickets to a particular type of show or a band is in town that you want to see. Wouldn't it be great if it already knew that you were a fan of that particular band and said, hey, they're going to be touring and this is when they're coming to your city?
Right.
That would be just like a useful.
And if I'd had a conversation earlier with my AI, it could say like, hey, I noticed you've been like, my wife and I have seen the band Bare Naked Ladies like, I don't know, 15 times. Hey, every time they come to town, you seem to buy tickets. Do you want me to just buy tickets for you the next time they come to town? Oh my gosh, yes. I don't want to wait in the lines. I don't want to sit and worry about the queue. I want you electronically to just blast in there and get me a ticket when it's time. Because I care about the ticket. I don't care about the buying process. I don't care about being involved in any of that, right?
Right. Maybe set a budget and let it do its thing, right?
Yeah.
Buying tickets for a concert is like one of the biggest pain points that there is right now if you're into anything like live music or shows. So, I mean, anything that would make that easier would be great. But.
Yeah, and Taylor Swift just started her summer tour. And I just saw a girl saying yesterday, I said, man, $1,000 to see Taylor Swift in concert is too much money. That's what it's going for on secondary marketplaces kind of stuff. And then the morning of the concert, she's like, well, $1,000 isn't so bad, right? Like she's slowly justifying it to herself that like, I mean, I want that opportunity. This is what I've got to pay. It's just crazy to me to think about like $1,000 just to see a show. I mean, we're paying, I think we paid like $100 and something to see Green Day and Weezer and not Panic at the Disco, somebody else. Anyway, it was a great show, but I was like, man, was this show worth $150 a person? That just seems like a lot of money. Anyway, that's a whole
So, we've got a couple more questions in chat if you don't mind. We going back to theirs, make sure we get everybody's question
let's do it.
A really good question from Hugo Catchpole. How are you going about promoting new features in your skill, and how are you marketing your skill to new customers?
Great question.
That's a good question. So that's something that honestly we could do better at. We don't spend a lot of effort right now trying to promote new content in our skills. And that's something that's on my goal to do this year. To help people get introduced to different types of content that we have, because a lot of folks have listened to our sleep sounds for years, but they might not be aware that we now offer stories, meditations, and journeys. So that's something that we're definitely thinking about. I think having some kind of in-skill messaging mechanism to do that is a great way to introduce new features to customers. We do it right now in regards to looping with our single sound skills. If you start that up, and I think on the second skill launch, if you haven't enabled looping already, it will say, hey, if you want this to loop instead of stopping after an hour, you can just say loop on while the sound is playing. So it's just interactions like that, I think, are a great way to introduce new features and make customers aware of them. What was the second half of that question?
How do you market to new customers?
Yes. This is an ongoing challenge. I don't have a perfect answer for you. I think it varies depending on the skill. Maybe you do digital ads, maybe you do more traditional advertising. It depends. You got to experiment with a lot of things. We've experimented with a lot of things. Some things work, some things don't. And it really depends on what budget you can put toward those things as well. Advertising costs a lot of money, and until you've really perfected your ad to make sure that you're getting good conversion rates, it's hard to justify spending a lot of money on it.
Yeah, makes sense.
You mentioned doing testing. I would imagine you're testing not only your interaction model, but also the code behind it. I know that we offer A/B testing for testing the code behind it, but do you have anything that you do uniquely around testing your interaction model? Do you push and pull frequently to see like, hey, this worked, this didn't work, and constantly replace, or how does that work for you?
Yeah. So one thing we do whenever we add new content, we have to add new slot values to accommodate for it. So largely speaking, our interaction model itself doesn't change very often. So in the early days when we first built that, we did a lot of testing, a lot of manual testing to make sure that things were getting recognized properly. But since then, the larger voice model doesn't change, but our slots do. So when we introduce new slots for a new piece of content, we create a list of aliases. And sometimes those are based off just different ways that you might say the piece of content. For example, if it's a story and it starts with the word the, you might ask for it without the word the. Mm-hmm. And one thing we do is actually go into the testing portion of the developer console and try speaking that title for that content to Alexa to see what the I think the ASR captures, right? And sometimes it's wildly different from what I actually said, and sometimes it's spot on. And sometimes if I keep doing it, it'll just keep giving me new things. So I'll have to put those perceptions of what Alexa heard into my aliases to make sure that if that's what it thinks somebody said, it still ends up going to that piece of content.
And are you relying primarily on your own voice or your team's voices to test this, or do you have mechanisms to try different accents and things like that?
Honestly, yeah, just our team. Yeah, it's sometimes we get customer feedback through our support channels saying, hey, I'm trying to ask for this and I'm not able to get it, or maybe it only works half the time. In those situations, sometimes we can figure out some variations to add. When it comes to a different language, it's very difficult. Usually I'll have to ask the customer to provide me a list of words that I need to see if we have added already or not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really tricky. One of the mechanisms that I've used for some of the things that I've built is if it's, you have the slot value, which is the words the user spoke for whatever the slot happens to be. And then you have entity resolution, which are the matches that it had related to what the user spoke. And what I found is that if I get the user to say something and I get a slot value, but I don't resolve anything, I take that slot value and throw it into the database and say, hey, this was a miss. I don't know if you guys have mechanisms like that, but that's something that has been really handy for me to recognize, like, people are asking for this and I'm not handling it today, so I need to solve that quickly.
We do. Yeah, we do that too. I actually have a little dashboard up. So some of our most common actually misses are just random words. Volume 2 is one of them, for example,
Yeah.
And sometimes there'll be something more relevant up there that we capture and then we add it to our aliases.
I love that you have a live dashboard you can just turn and look at. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that just goes to show how important it is.
Yeah, it's super important. And whenever something surfaces that makes sense for us to add, we add it within our next certification cycle.
That's really cool.
Cool. Back to ISPs, Chuck Phelps had a question. We only have about 7 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get through some of these other questions. Chuck Phelps wanted to know, I know you've used ISPs. Have you dabbled in consumables at all in any of your skills?
I haven't. Reason being, for us, our economics don't make sense for consumables. But I think if you're building something that's more of a game that relies less on streaming audio or video, then consumables make a lot of sense.
Agreed. Yeah, I can't imagine people saying, I need to buy 7 more coins so I can sleep tonight.
Right.
That would not be an ideal business model.
I need to buy 10 more hours of audio.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right. Chuck also wanted to know, how do you handle customer support requests? What are the ways that you can recommend to users to reach out to you if they have any support issues?
Yeah, so we have a form on our website. That's our most common way to get in touch with us. It goes to a support email. It gathers a few vital pieces of information, like what platform the customer is on, and their name, and just basic information. We also have an email address that we put in our skill descriptions in case somebody wants to just email us right off the bat.
Smart.
Or, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah. Is there anything in skill, not that I would expect you to capture support data, but is there anything in the skill that at least points them in the right direction? Like, hey, you can, if you're having issues, or in your help messaging or anything like that?
So we don't put anything in the messaging about how to reach out to us. But one thing that we do in our, in the sleep jar skill, if you try to turn looping on, I think it is, it'll say hey, if you're having issues with audio, the skill loops by default. If you're having issues with audio playback, try restarting your device, because most often that solves the problem.
Got it.
So just kind of being proactive about things like that a customer might do that would indicate that they're experiencing a problem, and trying to proactively solve it for them before they reach out to support takes a huge load off of my plate, because then I don't have to go through those support tickets, right?
Right. Are you the support team also?
I am, yeah. So nice. I do essentially all of our voice development. I do all our support tickets, and I also build our API that powers our mobile apps.
Cool.
Wow.
Got your hands dirty.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
Another question for Nick from the chat. David Curley and Twitch wants to know, do you think introducing these long-term customers to different content risks disrupting the stickiness of the experience? Like if they change which type of experience they're having, will they not go back to the previous?
That's a good question. I don't think it's a risk. One thing that we do is if you're a premium customer, you can combine our narrated content with a sound. And once the narrated content ends, the sound will keep playing. So that allows them to kind of keep using the old school way of just listening to sounds while also experimenting with the new content that we offer through narrations.
Cool.
And of course, if you try a narration and you feel like it's not for you and you just want to use sounds, that's fine. When we introduce in-skill messaging to support this content and advertise this content, so to speak, we're going to be very thoughtful about how frequently and how many times we do it. So if the customer decides they don't want to try stories or meditations, then they don't have to.
Great. Very cool.
All right. Ethan Richardson has a last couple of questions here. The first one is, he says, "Hey, Nick, great work. Is there anything in the pipeline to recommend sleep sounds based on how a user is feeling that the user mentioned? Something like, I'm feeling stressed." I don't know if I think he's looking for pipeline definitions or if you've thought about how to solve a problem like that, but any thoughts you have would be great.
Yeah, I've thought about this. I thought about this a couple of years ago, and I almost built it out. And the reason why I didn't is I feel like it's very personal. Some folks find the sound of the ocean very calming. Some folks hate the ocean or hate the beach, and they don't want to hear that sound ever. They would rather hear crickets, for example.
Sure.
So I think when it comes to trying to associate content with feelings, because it's not 100% match for everybody, I didn't want to make that leap quite yet. If there were more indicators that Alexa could provide about the person's mood, and maybe data that we could gather about their listening preferences in order to make a better recommendation, then I think that's something that we could look into in the future.
So was that hinting at a desire for some sentiment analysis or something like that?
Yes.
Got it.
Knowing if the customer, I think, is angry would be an excellent way for a skill developer to respond with, hey, maybe here's how to reach out to support.
Right.
Or, offer some empathy.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. And then Ethan had one final question, which was, are there any plans to make the APL more contextual? Like, I really like the visualization you have, but I wish it was orange, or anything along those lines.
Yes. I won't go into detail on that, but yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to another feature announcement. That sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been a fantastic conversation with Nick, but also with all of you. The conversation is the heart of all of this, and being able to hear what everybody thinks. And certainly, Nick, lists like yours of feature requests go a very long way in continuing to move our product and its roadmap forward. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and for your questions. And Nick, certainly, I want to thank you for taking your time.
Everybody.
Always appreciated it.
Thank you so much for being on this show today.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do this again in person sometime.
I would love that for sure. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
Agreed. All right. Well, with that, Amanda, anything before we wrap up?
No, just be sure to tune in next week. We've got an exciting show planned, and as we do every week. So thank you so much.
And looking forward to it.
All right. Everybody take care. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you all again next Tuesday. Bye, everyone.